everyone, welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. We just celebrated our 73rd Republic Day yesterday, and the country is not getting any younger. We're 73 years old, and we are now getting ready for the annual drama of the Union budget. We're facing a tough economic situation, and I think there are lots of hopes and expectations from the budget. I would venture to say that the nation is not in a mood for an excruciatingly long speech, high on vision, and less on making life easier for us. In fact, we would be happy with just a few measures that actually improve our lives after 2 years of a debilitating pandemic. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is going to present her fourth budget against the backdrop of a rather damning report from the global NGO Oxfam, which was released on 17th Jan. It is titled Inequality Kills, and this is what it says: while economic inequality has widened all over the world, especially after the pandemic, India has fared far worse than other countries. According to the report, 84% of Indian households suffered a drop in income, while the collective wealth of just 100 of India's richest people reached a record high of 57.3 lakh crores in 2021. Just imagine those numbers and compare them with our annual budgets for health or education. In fact, until a few weeks ago, I would venture to say that even if this very negative report from Oxfam had been released, it would have been just dismissed as negative, cribbing, one-sided, the typical reaction that we have encountered, whether it is our criticism of the manner in which goods and services tax was rolled out, what they did about migrant labor, or anything else. Soaring stock indices, booming stock market, a proliferation of unicorns, never mind that they are mostly cash guzzlers who are not showing profit, had millions of people. In fact, I keep saying about 20 odd million new investors have come into the market, and they have been on a high. And they were a force enough to dismiss every negative criticism. This narrative has hit a huge road bump as the stock market, which has been held up essentially by this government as a barometer of all that's great and good today, has suddenly turned rocky. In fact, coincidentally, on 17 Jan itself. In fact, the benchmark BSE sensitive index, look at how it's moved. It dropped sharply and continuously from October to December 2021. It then recovered in early Jan 2022, but has again fallen sharply from a high of 61,385 on 17 Jan. High was on the day the Oxfam report came out, to drop to 56,409 on 25th Jan at the time when I was doing this column. Is this another correction in the long bull run, or has the tide turned? With inflation rising, interest rate hikes coming soon, are the happy days over? We will know over the next few months. But the point is, when we hear the budget, the mood is not the same as it was. It's not as buoyant. A relentless rise in the stock market indices, riding on soaring corporate profits, was the government's counter to the grim reality faced by a large section of India's population, including the long march of millions of migrant workers, images of burning pyres, corpses floating in the Ganga during the first and second wave of the dreaded virus. Everybody ignored this. Suddenly today, when our newly minted millions of investors, mostly in well-paid jobs, find that the going is rough, many have borrowed money to invest, things look very rocky, all the geniuses who had surefire bets are suddenly looking very dodgy, there is distress. Concerns about rising inflation, high fuel prices. When the sentiment changes, all this begins to matter to people. Distress caused by business disruption hasn't been faced by many of these techies in high-paying jobs, but everybody else has suffered. And the anxiety faced by entrepreneurs and traders, which has been ignored till now by a relentlessly punitive state, which frequently changed rules and compliance requirements, were all relegated to the background but are going to come to the fore now. A sharp fall in the markets has a way, like I said, of changing sentiment. Suddenly, everything looks different. So now let's come back to the Oxfam report as well as a global risks report of 2022, which was released just before the World Economic Forum met at Davos very recently. All these are offering very timely signals to our government on what it should do if it is in a mood to listen. For instance, the World Economic Forum has identified widespread youth disillusionment, failure of technology governance, and digital inequality among the top 5 risks for India. The Oxfam report is far more damning, like I said. In contrast to the wealth of billionaires reaching a record high, imagine the bottom 50% of all Indians hold only 6% of national wealth. This growing inequality, like I said, is worse than anywhere else in the world, even if it may be a global trend. More than 46 million Indians, meanwhile, are estimated to have fallen into extreme poverty in 2020, which is nearly half the global new poor, according to the United Nations. In fact, let me quote, "The stark wealth inequality in India results from an economic system rigged in favor of the super rich over the poor and the marginalized," says the Oxfam briefing, which was released ahead of the WEF. Meanwhile, look at what's happening with unemployment. It remains a major concern for anyone who wants to listen. People had still to recover their livelihoods after the crushing demonetization impact. Badly executed GST decimated small and medium traders and businessmen. Professionals are struggling with badly designed tax and corporate reporting portals and steep, frequent changes in regulation, automated penalties which cause stress because they are just imposed and deducted from what is owed to you. All this increases compliance costs for all of us. We ourselves face this. Everything. If professionals are stressed, somebody has to pay for it, and that is us. The COVID lockdown and the extreme hardship that it caused has come over and above this. When it comes to unemployment, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy has repeatedly pointed out that our employment numbers have been sliding since 2016. No need to connect the dots. You know what happened before that. Unemployment among graduates in the 20 to 24 year age group is as high, believe it or not, as 63.4% in 2019, before COVID. Then came the blow of the lockdown. Nearly 1 year after the lockdown, in February 2021, employment was down by 7 million of what it was in February 2020. Employment in February 2020 was 406 million. That was down to 399, says Mahesh Vyas, who heads CMI, in his paper in March 2021. It is in this backdrop that Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman stands up to present her budget a few days from now, 1st February. People are bound to remember that at this time, all the slogans of the past 4 years, mind you, have been forgotten. Do you remember? Make in India, Stand Up India, Digital India, minimum government, maximum governance. In fact, we have an intrusive and punitive government. These slogans have proved hollow and empty. The government remains, like I said, vast, punitive, litigious beast, and ease of doing business or even ease of living has been a pipe dream for most of us. There is bound to be less patience today about grand spending ideas and development plans with little to show by way of implementation except on pet projects that move full steam ahead. Question is, will the finance minister address the cost of 2 years of dealing with fear, death, unemployment, and the incalculable damage to students, and even the cost of education and healthcare, which have been soaring? It's not just this segment. What we need is a short, crisp budget that simplifies taxes and compliances, does not tinker needlessly with indirect taxes, except maybe to reduce them, makes a serious attempt to reduce red tape and compliance. The state has to understand the people and stop being so punitive. It has to focus on employment generation rather than drive industry away. Rising inflation, like I said, higher education costs, health costs, job losses, not only have affected the middle class, the situation is much worse for senior citizens who do not have inflation adjusted pensions. They have their nest eggs, usually in fixed deposits or banks, and with lower interest rates, they are seeing their spending power shrink badly. Theirs is a constant struggle not only to deal with less money, but being forced to deal with technology, online payments, and to avoid mis-selling of financial products by their own bank's relationship managers. The budget needs to address their concerns too. Cannot have people stressed all the time. The Oxfam report has suggested imposition of a wealth tax on super rich Indians. Here's what it says: a 1% tax on the wealth of top 98 Indian billionaires, less than 100 people, can fund the total annual expenditure of the Department of School Education and Literacy under the Ministry of Education. This makes sense when you consider that the collective wealth of India's 100 wealthiest, like I said, rose to 57.3 lakh crore. Moreover, Oxfam has also pointed out that indirect taxation, which every one of us pays, when you buy a packet of glucose biscuit, you are paying tax on it. So whether you are the poorest of poor, you are paying indirect taxes. These are today contributing to 63.69% of tax revenue. Actually, this is a figure from 2020. Since then, additional tax has been imposed on fuel, which rose 33% in the first 6 months of 2021 compared to last year, and is 79% more than the pre-COVID levels, says Oxfam. In contrast, corporate tax reduced to 22% from 30% in September 2019. Now, what Oxfam suggests is all very well, but in the Indian context, mere imposition of a tax, a cess, a surcharge does not mean that money that's collected by the government will actually be used to mitigate the hardship of the poor. By all means, tax the rich, but will it be implemented and used for social security, ensuring better allocation for the really poor and needy in health and education? In fact, people in higher income brackets already pay a health and education cess. And remember, this is in the backdrop of a cost imposed by corruption, harassment by tax officials. In fact, even something as simple as faceless assessment, which was supposed to have made things easier and eliminated corruption, is marred by so many technical glitches, such as imposition of wrong penalties, additional work, adjustment of refunds, making claims again. All this is really stressful and causing anxiety. In fact, CA Amit Patel has described this in detail in an article on Moneylife called Tax Torture Season 2. You may want to read that. Like I said before, corruption remains as high as ever. Doesn't matter the number of hikes and DA adjusted pay commission increments that people in government are getting. We have regular media reports about lucrative posts in the police, customs, central investigation agencies being brazenly auctioned. Many of you have seen what's happened in Maharashtra. Nirmala Sitharaman's previous budgets and rollbacks did not go down well with people at all, but she rode a booming bull market till all was forgotten. The pandemic and this big uncertainty in stock markets has changed all that, and we really hope that she's going to deliver this time. India needs it. Thank you.